Wonderful. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much indeed. Really appreciate you joining today's session. I wanted to talk today about mind-blowing PowerPoint for effective visual storytelling. I know that the conference is really all about Excel, but presenting information, presenting data from your reports, from the information that you're creating is really rather important. And so I thought I would use today's session to really look at the kinds of things that you can do with PowerPoint to bring your content to life. So with that, I wanted to start off with a very brief question, looking at the idea of presenting data or presenting information, and ask, what is it about most presentations that's so, what's the word, bad? I mean, generally speaking, most presentations are, let's be honest, pretty terrible. Your audience is sat there thinking, why am I here? And there's even a term for it. We call it death by PowerPoint. When was the last time you had death by something and thought it was a good idea to keep going? And yet still, everyone does. Generally speaking, death by PowerPoint comes about because of the way you try to present information. Usually that's in text form or tabular form, for instance. And the problem is that the way people read and the way people listen is that it's all processed in the same part of the brain, something they call the phonological loop. And that means that if you're asking people to read a slide and listen to you presenting over the top of it, you get an interference effect which inhibits your audience's ability to take on board the information. That's one of the reasons underpinning why a lot of presentations are bad, and yet most people still tend to do it. You've got your audience sat there trying to think about what's going on, and in reality what happens is, well, this. And because of this, you get that. So you've all read the slide, you just want to move on, you don't want to listen to me talk about it some more, but again, inevitably presenters will desperately try to add some value to whatever war and peace they put up on the slide. And that means that one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to ignore you, which isn't great, or you're going to become really irritating, neither of which you particularly want. So the answer, as I'm hopefully demonstrating here, is to get rid of text and bullet points, because that is for documents, and instead use visuals and diagrams and animations that explain and reinforce your key messages. Critically, if you can synchronize those up with what the presenter is saying, then you can benefit from a process called dual coding of information, where everyone can take on board both of these streams, and so ultimately it's more engaging and more effective, which is really what you want. How do you do that, though? Because again, we're still talking about PowerPoint here, that program that everybody loves to hate. And yet actually, I think it can be really easy. And so what I want to do over the next 50 minutes or so with you is take you through a variety of different techniques live in PowerPoint to show you how you can bring your data, your reports, your information to life in front of an audience when you have to present that information. One of the key things that I think is going to be most helpful for anyone that's using lots of data is the idea of highlighting content. So a relatively simple example here first up, just a slide that we've created for one of our clients, which shows you a complex image. In this case, it's the office buildings that they create. This can be anything really, from a screenshot to a data table to a chart, but the idea is there's complexity there. And so what they want to say with this is, particular image, here's the office space that we've created. What is it about this space that will impress your clients when they walk in? There's lots of things to go for there. You click, and it focuses attention on these three important aspects. So this idea of highlighting content to capture attention and focus attention, I think, is really valuable, and it's achieved really easily using two relatively simple tools in PowerPoint. So if I just go into slide edit mode here, you can see this is the base picture. What I want to do is highlight, say, this mirror and this desk. Now, these are obviously kind of odd shapes. So to be able to do that, you need to use something called the freeform shape tool. You can find that in a few places, but on the Home tab on the ribbon, over on the right-hand side under Shapes, you've got all of these different shapes that you can now draw in PowerPoint. And under Lines at the top here, second in from the right-hand side, is this little kind of squiggly thing here called Freeform Shape. And what that does is it allows you to draw any custom shape, which is great, because now you can click on that and you can now click somewhere, say, at the top of the mirror there. And if you move your cursor, you might just be able to make out a little blue line there that's now going to draw the outline of a custom shape. You can move your cursor and click in the other corner of the mirror here, and that now creates a blue line across the top. And again, I've got a blue line which is now continuing. I'm going to click in the bottom right, click in the bottom left, and then bring it back up to the top. It'll turn in a color, in this case blue, and now you've got a nice, clean, clear, crisp cutout, if you like, of that mirror, a mask over the top of it. Again, you can do the same thing with the desk here. I'm going to click and let go and click and let go and click and let go to draw around it. And the reason for saying click and let go all the time is that if you click and hold your mouse button down, as you would do with any other kind of shape in PowerPoint, PowerPoint thinks that you're clicking furiously, and so you end up with lots of wiggly lines all over the place, which is really very messy. But now, nice and simply, I've created those 3 freeform shapes. Now, I wanted to be able to highlight those things, and I've actually obscured them, which clearly isn't great. So what you need to do now is the second part of this process, which is to draw another box, this time over the entire slide. Let's get rid of the outline for that, and maybe also change the color to black. And I'm going to go to the Shape Format tab here and use the Arrange tool over on the right-hand side here, just to send this black rectangle backwards in the layers behind those freeform shapes that I drew before. And what you can now do is use a second tool called the Merge Shape Tools to be able to cut away these blue freeform shapes from the black rectangle. So to do that, you select the black rectangle first, then press and hold the Shift key to shift click and select all of these other elements. Go to the Shape Format tab on the ribbon, and over on the left hand side you see here Merge Shapes, this little Venn diagram type icon. And with that you have half a dozen different tools that allow you to manipulate the shapes relative to each other. And the one that you want here is the one at the bottom called Subtract, because it will subtract or cut away those blue freeform shapes from the black rectangle, now revealing behind the mirror, the desk and the glass wall. And so that is a really nice way to be able to focus attention on just those elements and not have people be distracted by the rest of the image or the data table or the chart or whatever it happens to be. This is a bit too harsh, I think. It's just those things in isolation, which looks a little bit odd. So in this case, I'm also going to right click on that black rectangle, choose Format Shape from the pop-up menu here, and then on the right hand side you'll see Fill Options. And down at the bottom is this little slider called Transparency, which allows you to now add a little bit of transparency to that shape, and then you can get rid of it. And now you can kind of see the image behind, and you can add in a simple fade animation so that now in slideshow mode, what you have is, here's the space, click, these are the areas that I want you to focus. So it's a really nice, simple technique, but it works very powerfully to get your audience to all look at the same thing at the same time, which I think is an important way to control a presentation and make sure that it's effective. So with that, I then wanted to show you that you can have something simple, like a simple static image, but you can also have things much more complicated. So here's another slide that we've created. This time we've built a hospital in PowerPoint, as you do, and then you can build up lots of different animated sequences where you're highlighting various elements of the story at the hospital at different times to tell part of the story. And I've sped this up a little bit just to give you an idea of it. I don't want to present it, but it shows you how that technique can be used both very simply and in even much more complex scenarios as well. But either way, it's very effective. The next thing that I wanted to look at is that simple thing that I did right at the end there, which is animate it and show you how animations can be incredibly powerful when you're presenting, well, really anything, but especially anything with data and with charts. Now, animations are often seen as being a bit frivolous, but in reality, I think they're an essential part of presenting. And really, they can be seen as a remote control, if you like, for your audience's attention. If used correctly, really allow your presentations to take off. Animations come in a few different forms in PowerPoint, and really they're all about helping you get away from information overload where people are just lost and bored, whether that's kind of text-based stuff and it just blows their minds because they really can't focus on it and they just fall asleep or get bored of it, or whether it's something that is more complex perhaps that you want to present. Ultimately, you want your audience to think when you're presenting, but not too much all at once. You need to be able to take them along with you on a journey. So if you're presenting slides that are, really complex and in depth, like this diagram, for example, or data tables, charts, whatnot that you might be showing, it's a bit overwhelming. It's too much. It's difficult for people to take on board. And that kind of thing is ultimately going to cause problems. Instead, you can use animation not necessarily to simplify things, but certainly to pace the flow of information. So you can bring in things piece by piece, animate them, annotate them, bring things on so that people really understand the story and the intent behind what you're telling them. And so when it comes to animations in PowerPoint, there are 4 main types, and they're all color coded, which is really useful. The first type of animation is green, and it's an entrance animation. These are the ones that you should use most frequently. I think they're the most valuable when presenting, and they allow things to appear on the slide. They pace the flow of information, make sure that everything is synchronized together. And you've got a variety of different effects, things like a fade, things like a wipe, and if you really need it, a fly in, which comes from the end of the slide. You've then got the yellow emphasis animations, and if used sparingly and appropriately, these are really powerful as well, because they allow you to emphasize something, to highlight something or make a change. And so in this case, it could be making something larger or smaller. You can have something spin around, which might be appropriate occasionally, or something like change color, which can be really helpful to draw attention. Then you've got the red exit animations, and these, as the name suggests, take something away from the slide. And they are the opposite of the entrance animation. So again, you've got things like fade out, wipe out, and fly out. And then the fourth type of animation is my favorite, but also the one to be used most sparingly, the motion path. And this allows you to move things around a slide. When it comes to motion in PowerPoint with the animations, you are allowed to move things up and down, and you are allowed to move things side to side. What you are not allowed to do is that, which is just painful and distracting and annoying. So when it comes to animation, the key is what helps you to pace the flow of information or to tell the story effectively. And once you've got those 4, you think, well, actually, how do you apply it? Well, it's all really very simple. It's controlled using the animations tab on the ribbon up here. And the best thing to do is probably to open up this thing here called the animation pane over on the right, because what that does is it brings up a list of all of the animations that you have on your slide. So you can see here, I've got these 4 green ones, and as you know, green is an entrance animation, so they all appear on the slide. I'm going to get rid of those for now. I'll show you kind of how you can add things in. And so when it comes to adding animations, it's really very simple. Select an object that you want to animate. Go to the animations tab on the ribbon, and over on the right hand side here, this little star with the green plus there, click add animation, and here you have those whole load of different animations that you can add in. Again, the entrance, the emphasis, the exit, and scroll down for the motion parts. Note that there are quite a lot more than the ones that I showed you, and some of them can be okay. Something like a zoom is all right if you need something to kind of come in from a central point. It looks like that. But what you really don't want to do is use something that's distracting, like a bounce, for example, which is terrible and just isn't going to add any value to what you're presenting. So you can select an object, add animation, and choose something like a fade, for example, which is my default preferred animation, and that will now give you a green star in the animation pane. And if I go into slideshow mode, you see that step 1 here is not there. And if you click, it will now trigger that animation and it will fade in. And you can click on step 2 and choose add animation and fade as well if you want to, and click on step 3 and so on and so forth. But that can become really tiresome if you want to animate lots of things. So a nice way to do this is to select all the objects that you want in the order that you want them to animate. So step 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, for example. Then go to the add animation button and now choose your animation of choice. So the fade animation, for example, there. And what that now does is it animates each of these objects that you had selected. And critically, if you have all of them selected there, go to the timing portion on the top right hand corner of the animations tab up here. You can choose this drop down for when they start. So you can do it with previous, so they're all happening at the same time. You can do it after previous, so they happen sequentially, one after the other, or you can have it on a click, and that will then give you a little mouse icon next to each of them. And the nice thing about this is that now each animation is going to happen on a click when you tell it to, and it will happen in the order that you select the objects. So it's a really neat way to be able to build up animation sequences very quickly and very easily. The next thing really to just focus on a little bit is that you can also change the nature of these animations. And I'll just do this briefly before we get onto some of the storytelling elements. So here, for example, I have a green arrow right in the middle of the slide there. And as you can see on the right hand side in the animation pane, there is a green entrance animation on it. If I just put this into slideshow mode, clearly that doesn't appear because it's got an entrance animation, so it's waiting for me to click for it to come in. But just watch that space at the top here, wait for the green arrow. And as I click, just watch that animation. I'll do it a few times. Does that jar with you? It's kind of odd, isn't it? Because what it's doing is it's wiping in from the bottom, which is kind of counter to the direction of the arrow. And so if you used a wipe animation here, this can be problematic if you want to give a sense of direction. So if you're using anything other than fade, you can actually control how those animations work. So I've got the wipe animation added in here. If you go back to the animations tab, you'll see just next to the add animation button here on the right is this little thing here called effect options. And in this case, it's giving me an upwards arrow. This controls the type of effect. So this is a wipe animation, and you can now choose the direction. So you can choose to wipe from bottom or from left, from right or from top. So if I now do from left, you see that it wipes in sympathetic kind of direction to the arrow, so that works much more neatly. And again, just to show you a variety of different things that you can do, here I've got an exit animation which is called a wheel. It's not something that I would normally recommend, but just to show you the options there, and it can wheel round all the way like that, and it's just once. But you can click on the effect options, and here you've got different spokes. So one spoke look like that going round, or you can choose 8 spokes, and you see it's a very different effect. So consider using those if it's appropriate. Something like a grow shrink animation, you can change it so that it can be larger, or it can be smaller if you want to, so you can change the size of it. And you can also choose the direction from these effect options, so it can grow in all directions or just horizontally and vertically, for example. So again, a few choices that you can do there. And when it comes to motion paths, again, incredibly useful when appropriate, but use it sparingly. Here you've got this little arrow here which shows you where the shape is going to move, and you can click on either end of those arrows and you can move this around here, move the red end there, the red arrow, and that will give you a path that the object is going to move along, and now it's going to move up into the top left of the screen there because I've manipulated the motion path. So using animations is really very simple. Why do you want to use it? Well, as I said, to me it's all about pacing the flow of information. And if you have something like a chart, I mean, this is fairly simple, and yet it's still quite overwhelming if you were to throw all of this up at someone when you're presenting to them. It's just there's too much to take in because they're not familiar with the content. So I think animating charts is incredibly valuable and incredibly useful when you're presenting, and it's exactly the same thing. Now, this is a chart that's built in PowerPoint, but it's driven by Excel. So I can bring up the Excel tool here, and if you have a chart that you've created in Excel, you can copy and paste it into PowerPoint, and everything that I'm going to show you is going to work out nicely as well. And if you want more stuff on specifically charting in Excel, check out Echo Swinford's session, I think in about 10 or so hours or time at some point later on Wednesday, depending upon where you are, and she'll go into a lot of detail about charting and the things that you can do with it. But I specifically here want to talk about animating the chart. So you can select a chart, as I said, in PowerPoint or copied over from Excel, go to the animations tab, add in your animation, and I'm going to choose a wipe because I like the idea of the bars all growing up from the bottom. So we'll choose a wipe there. And so what the animation can now do is paste the flow of information. So I can build this in, nothing appears on the slide, and then you click and, oh, well, that's no good, is it? Because it's still the same thing. Everything is coming up all at once. You just have to wait to get there. So it's problematic. But we're not quite done yet, because if you add an animation to a chart and you choose the effect options, you get the same options as before. So the wipe direction, for instance. But if you click on this, you can also choose the sequence. And so at this point, you can choose whether it animates as a single object, which is the default, or you can choose by series or by category or by element in either. And so if I was to choose by series, for example, now in the animation pane, you can maybe just about make out this little gray double arrow down here. Click on that, and now that shows you that there are lots of animations for each individual element or each individual series. So now when I put it into slideshow mode, the first thing I do is click to bring up the axes. That allows you to explain what's going to be seen. It contextualizes the data so that everyone is prepared for it and not trying to jump ahead. And now you can click to bring up just the blue series, then just the green series, just the yellow series, and just the pink, and so on. Alternatively, we can flip it around, select this, choose effect options, and now I'm going to do it by category. And again, the same deal, but this time it's the axes followed by north, then south, then east, then west. So you have a lot of granular control over what's going on. And it doesn't even need to be that you're sticking with just that formula. So here, for example, I've got another one, which is like an us versus them kind of thing. So it's one data set here, the pink ones, compared to other players in a market, for example. So it's us versus our competitors, and you don't really want to separate those out. So again, the same deal. I can select this, choose add animation. Let's choose a wipe, for example, like that from before, choose effect options, and this time we're going to choose by elements in series, for instance. No, elements in category would be better. And now you get loads and loads and loads of animations because each of these bars has its own animation there. But what I really want to do is to make sure that it's not all on clicks, so it's a pain for the presenter and kind of troublesome and tiresome. So I'm going to select this top one, which is the axes, and I'm just going to right click on that and say that that can happen automatically, so just with previous. This first thing here is going to be the first element in category 1, so I'm going to do that, a click for that, and then I'm going to do a click for the competitors and another click for the competitors, but I'm going to have both of those come up at the same time. This is us, this is the first competitor, this is the second one, this is us, this is the first competitor, this is the second one, and so on. And so now you have customized each individual animation within this sequence so that you can now bring in the axes to first of all explain it, then you can click for us and click for the competition together, click for us, click for the competition together, and so on and so forth, where you're now controlling at quite a granular level of detail exactly what's going on. So really simple techniques, and again, this will work if you copy and paste the chart over from Excel into PowerPoint, but it's a great way to be able to present your content and focus in on what's important. And then the idea of using a mask from before also applies here. So I'm just going to do this as a simple set of boxes. So we've got one box there, nice and easy. Let's get rid of the outline from that. Let's make that white. Right click on it, choose format shape, do the fill options, add in that transparency. So everything that we did before, nice and easy like that. I'm just going to copy this across. Let's say you want to highlight category 2, for example, like that. Select both of these, add in a simple fade animation, so you've got that on there. And now your entire sequence is, well, here's us, here's them, here's us, here's them, here's us, here's them, here's us, here's them. But what I really want to focus on today is category 2. And so you now bring in those masks over the top of the data points to focus in on just what's important. That much further if you want to, with much more dynamic presenting of charts and infographics as well, if you wanted to start building up those and come up with other forms of data visualization, not just relying on charts. So here I'm going to blend an Excel based chart, so this kind of sequence here, so exactly as you've just seen, but I've paused on category 4. And so I'm going to talk about categories 1, 2 and 3 like that, and then you click for category 4, and then I've drawn a circle over that, and then I've drawn some extra points so you can now see exactly what the data is at the top there. So you're looking at something complex and you're focusing in on a particular element of it and then magnifying that to kind of draw people's attention to it. And again, this is nice and simply done just using an Excel based chart here and then a circle, a circle just here, for example, a line here, another circle here like that, and then a couple of bars that I've created with some text in it. So it's that blend now of the familiar kind of Excel driven accurate data chart with now something that's just drawn using very simple boxes, nice and easily, to be able to focus in on what's important. And if you like that kind of thing, you then think, well, okay, I could do that, which is great, but what about trying to make things look a little bit nicer? And so you can have something like this if you really wanted to make an impact. Maybe you're presenting to customers or it's something you're doing from a marketing perspective, maybe. Let's not make it look like an Excel chart or a PowerPoint chart. Let's make it look and feel much better where you're building out things that just don't feel like a traditional bar chart, for instance. So here using a nice image, kind of with a bit of a dodgy axis, admittedly, but if you take the axis to be in line with this text here, which is probably fair enough, it just feels like it's more cohesive in the way that all of this works. So plenty of different things that you can do. And this technique here of kind of animating this content out of this pan is, on the face of it, very simple, but actually if you try to do it, maybe a little tricky, and then you think, actually no, it's really easy to do once you get your head around how to do it. And it's using the same idea as the masks from before, but just now with a picture. So it's using layering of content. So if I were to take this image, so this is just the base image that we're using here, what you really want to be able to do is to cut out just this pan from the background image. Now, there are a few ways of doing this, but I think the most foolproof way of doing it, if you want a solid object to go over the top of this, is to use a combination of the tools that we used before, so the merge shape tools. So I can take this pan, and around the pan I have drawn a circle for most of the pan there, and then I've also drawn a little extra bit of circle here just to cover that pouring lip from the pan. And then you can select both of these objects and use that same merge shape tools sequence that I looked at before, but this time don't use subtract, use something called union. So again, it's under shape format in the right hand side, and then over on the left hand side here, merge shapes, and you want the top one called union, which merges these together so that now they are a single shape. If you're really precise, you'll notice that it's not quite got what you want there. There's still a little bit of a lip, which is maybe frustrating. And so you can, you can now right click on any shape in PowerPoint and choose edit points, which allows you to now see all the points where you clicked if you're creating a freeform shape, or all of the points that make up that shape. And you can now manipulate these. Now it starts to get a little bit complex, so I wouldn't recommend people do it too much, but maybe for something simple it's nice to know. And so what you can now do is remove a point by right clicking on it and choosing delete point, or simply pressing and holding the control key and hovering over a point and clicking and deleting it. And I can now delete that one there, for example. Let's move this to here. And when you start moving things, you also get these little vector, Bezier vector grab handles here, so that you can now manipulate the shape even more. So now that's much more accurate in terms of what you want. So now we've got this here, you can see this is a shape over the top of it. It lines in nicely with the pan. I've got this extra piece here just because I want it all to be complete. So let's merge those together. And now what I want to do is to take this image in the background, select the image, then select the crop mask that you've just drawn, go to the shape format tab on the ribbon, merge shapes again on the left, and this time choose a tool called intersect, which keeps just the overlap of the two things that you have selected. So in this case, the picture and that freeform shape that you've drawn. And now you think, well, what's happened? And what it's done is it's now given me a cutout around the edge of the pan. And if you go to the picture format tab, a bit like we had before with the shape format tab, you've got these arrange tools on the right hand side, which allow you to just bring this forward, and you can now bring it to the front of the slide so it's covering over all of your chart content there. And so now when you put this into slideshow mode, you've got this, which is actually two pictures just laid on top of each other, although your audience would never know. And then when you click, those data bars come in from underneath this cutout pan image. So you can start to make some really interesting looking data sets that people would never think was done in Excel or PowerPoint or anything like that. And it's a really quick, nice way to display information in a beautiful style, as well as being effective. And here's another one, just kind of briefly, it's a cityscape. Again, it's the same deal. We've used that cutout technique, and here just got some simple circles around it to show the growing sphere of influence, if you like. So that's the idea that we've got there, and then some later labels to kind of bring that up. So lots of different approaches you can take. Again, let's just show you behind the curtain kind of how this works. There you've got your cityscape cut out, just overlaying some circles underneath. So with that, you've got some interesting things that you can do, but what if you don't want just a chart? What if you want to build out something a little bit more interesting? Well, you can use icons maybe to start doing some simple data visualization. That could be a good start. And you can access a whole lot of icons natively in PowerPoint, especially if you have Office 365, where there's a whole load for you to choose from. So if you go to the Insert tab on the ribbon, I'm going to find this little duck and leaf motif here, which is icons. And if you click on that, it gives you a whole load of icons that you can choose from. Now you can scroll down and find something particularly interesting if you want to, like that, but it might take a while. Or you can use the search feature at the top here. And I'm just going to choose light bulb, for example, like that. Oh, it brings up a whole load of different things. What do I want? Let's choose. I think that one is probably a good one to go for. Maybe this one, which we'll do. Let's go for that one there, and then insert. And so you've now got a nice little icon, light bulb icon, which is lovely. But why is that special? Well, if you insert icons like that, they are in a format called an SVG, or a scalable vector graphic. And what that means is that if you make them really big, it doesn't pixelate, which is what a picture would do, which would get all kind of blocky and grainy and wouldn't look very good. And so at this point, you can now make it as large or as small as you want, and it's not going to lose any quality. But it's also got this new graphics format tab in PowerPoint, which means that you can now modify it. So it's not always going to be black. You can go to the graphics fill tab or the home tab, and you can do shape fill just as easily over here on the right. And you can now change the color of it. So you can maybe make it yellow, for example, because it's a light bulb. And you can also go back to the graphics format tab, and if you wanted to modify this in any way, you know, this is a single object at the moment, but maybe you wanted the light bulb to be switched off. Well, I can now take this one over on the left hand side. You can do here convert to shape, and what that will do is it will now break that down into individual components. Bizarrely, it still keeps it together as a group. So you can ungroup it by using the keyboard shortcut Control and Shift and G, and that will now break this apart into individual components. So I can now select a whole lot of these bits, for example, get rid of them, select all of this again, group it together, and now maybe you've got the light bulb which is off. So there's kind of a difference there between the two of them. So you're manipulating the shapes. Now let's imagine you want to use that as a setup for an infographic. So something very basic, very simple. I've got a light bulb here and we want to talk about 4 and 5 light bulbs at LED. Well, let's take this. I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut here to copy and drag that object. So instead of copy paste, I can use Control and Shift to drag it in line with the original. I'm going to redo that action using Control and Y. So I've got 5 of them there. And now I'm going to select these first 4 and I want to highlight those in some way. You can change the color like I did before, but if you go to the shape format tab in PowerPoint, there's all sorts of other things that you can do. So there's the shape fill option. So again, you could make this kind of a lighter color if you wanted to, or yellow. You can make the outline a different color, or you can add in something like a shape effect. And it's rare that I would recommend you use these, but in this particular case, I'm going to use something called a glow to give you a sense of the light bulbs kind of being on like that, which can work nicely. Likewise, I'm going to select this one. Let's get rid of all of those bits that you don't really want here, because this is going to be a light bulb that's off. And let's change the color of that so that it's maybe a bit gray like that. So now you're giving that sense of like the difference between the 4 out of the 5. Likewise here, we're going to have a lot of houses. So let's build that in. Let's get 5 of those. And this time, let's use a different technique. So this time to talk about the 2 and 5, I'm going to use maybe a little motif, just a circle perhaps around it, just highlighted in some way. Let's make that yellow so that it's still consistent with all of these things. Copy that over there like that. So you've got this way of being able to highlight those kind of 2 of 5 nicely there like that. You could also go above and beyond the idea of a standard chart and make your own custom chart. So I'm seeing this light bulb idea over here on the right. Would it be too much to have a curved bar chart? Don't shout at me. I know that there's all sorts of things wrong with it, but for an infographic, would that be bad? You know, use your best judgment about whether or not it's appropriate, whether it's easy to see what's going on. Clearly don't manipulate the data or make it difficult to see what's happening. But you've got this. So if you go to the Home tab on the ribbon, all of those different shapes, is there something there you can use? This is an interesting one. It's under basic shapes. It's over on the right hand side and it's just an arc. It is imaginatively called arc. And what it allows you to do is to draw an arc. But unlike a lot of shapes like a circle or a square, this one is just a line, but it also has these like little yellow buttons on it. And what they allow you to do is to change the size of that arc. So now I could have something drawn around the light bulb there like that. Let's maybe change the color of this so that perhaps it's white. You can change the thickness of it as well, so you can see things more easily. And I'm now going to copy and drag those, line them all up using the alignment tool. So shape format tab, align over here on the right, and you can do align left so they're all lined up. And now I'm just going to increase the size of these like that, and now use this arc to maybe change the nature of these like that there. Let's add in some text boxes. Maybe this is going to be key assistance. So it might be that I want to talk about, 76% use Alexa, for example. And so I can now change that. Let's have some bold text that's larger. And so that might want to sit there. Let's use that same copy drag, and this one is going to be kind of a Google Smart Assistant, just maybe going to be 54%. And then this one is going to be, oh, I don't know, something like 28%, and can be the generic dreaded other category like that. And so you've got this kind of neat way of giving a sense of increasing amounts. It's clearly not accurate, you've made it up, but it's a neat way to be able to get your story across without having to have all the data in the world there, just the relevant point. So if it's appropriate, that works really nicely. Okay, we are quite a bit over halfway, but close enough. I'll just pause for a moment, maybe to give you a chance to breathe as well as me. But are there any questions at this stage before I move on and talk about some other ways that you can start incorporating visual storytelling into your stories and data using PowerPoint? If there are any questions, type in the chat, really happy to answer them. Or if you want, I'll give you my contact details at the end, and we can have a chat at any point, because I appreciate that I've gone through a lot of things. Should also point out that this session is being recorded along with all of the other sessions in the conference, so you can absolutely take a look at those at a later date. And then in the downloads element, either now or very shortly, there will be a PDF summary of everything that I've talked about today with step-by-step instructions and also links to short video tutorials showing you how to do a lot of these things as well. So I appreciate that I'm going through a chunk of stuff, but I wanted to show you what's possible to open your mind to different approaches that you could use so that you can play around with them yourself and see which ones work best. So if there aren't any questions right now, no, then let's move on. One of the things that very few people have is a lot of time. And so what I want to do is just show you that you can use PowerPoint really quickly, even perhaps more quickly than I'm using it right now, with a few different productivity techniques and tips. One thing to note is that if you've not used it before, both in PowerPoint and Excel, and indeed across the entire Office suite, I would strongly recommend you use the Quick Access toolbar. So the Quick Access toolbar is this collection of icons here. It's all the functions that I use on a frequent basis to do a variety of different things. Now, if you've never used it before, then that's a shame, but it'll be up here on the top left-hand corner of your PowerPoint or your Excel screen. What you can then do is right-click on any of the icons on the top left here and do Show Quick Access Toolbar below the ribbon. That will now bring it down closer to the slide, minimizes mouse mileage, and means that you've got the full width of the screen to add any functions you want to it. And once you've got that, you can then add away. So if you're always using new slide, for example, you can right click on that and choose Add to Quick Access Toolbar. And so that'll populate this up nicely. You can customize it even further by right-clicking on the Quick Access toolbar and use this Customize Quick Access Toolbar button here, which brings up this little window, which on the left-hand side shows you everything you can add in, and on the right-hand side, everything that you currently have in. So there's lots of different things that you can choose and add in there. And hidden away at the top here in a splendid display of perfect user interface, sorry, you can choose from popular commands, which is laughable because none of these is popular, but you can also click on all commands here. Now there are several thousand functions that you can choose from. And this is exactly the same in Excel. So I'd encourage you to customize your PowerPoint and customize your Excel and Word and Outlook and all of those others as well. So it's a really neat thing to do. And if you want this quick access toolbar, the one that we use at Bright Carbon, the company that I work for, if you go to the Bright Carbon website, brightcarbon.com, and just do a search for quick access toolbar, there you'll find a short video explaining exactly this, but then also a download for this quick access toolbar that we use here. It's not to say that it's the best one. This is the one that we use, but at least it'll give you a good start because it's got things like the layer tools, the alignment tools, the merge shape tools, some of the animation functions, so it just saves you time in terms of setup. And once you like the idea of customizing Office, you can also get into using a variety of add-ins. Now, I don't know if you use lots of add-ins in Excel. There are many and plentiful excellent ones, but you also get really good add-ins for PowerPoint. Add-ins are available through the Insert tab on the ribbon, and then the Get Add-ins button here in the middle, which brings up the Office add-ins store, and there's a whole load that you can choose. So things like Pickit, or things like the Noun project or Pexels here are really good because they give you lots of completely free, beautiful, high quality imagery or icons, for example. So you've got more options there. But you can also get other add-ins, and so just if you'll give me 3 or 4 minutes of shameless plugging, we have our own add-in called Bright Slide. I feel like I can get away with it because it's available completely for free. We designed it for ourselves as a design agency just to overcome some of the irritations and frustrations that we have with PowerPoint to save you time. And so we thought, actually, it works really nicely. Let's share it with the community, as you all love to share cool things as well with everyone else. So Bright Slide is this neat way of being able to do a lot of things. It appears as a tab in the ribbon up here that gives you a whole load of enhanced or additional features. So if you wanted to line things up, for example, here you've got a beautiful slide that you've set up. It's nicely aligned. You send it to your boss, partly to show off, but also because you value her opinion. And she comes back and says, oh, that's great, but I've just made a few changes. Would you mind awfully tidying it up? And you think, oh, what do I do here? Oh, it's going to take forever, but not necessarily. You can use the alignment tools in PowerPoint to fix this in seconds. So I'm going to select all 3 of these black circles, go to the Home tab in the ribbon, and then Arrange over here on the right, and then down at the bottom is Align, and here you've got a whole lot of options that allow you to line objects up relative to each other. And so if you were to choose, for example, Align Top, great, they're now all aligned up. Likewise, I'm going to go to the Home tab and Arrange and Align, and here you can choose to distribute horizontally, so now they're evenly spaced. But if I were to, well, let's just make this a little bit simpler. I'm just going to delete everything except these bits here. This clear box button is in the right place, but these bits here I want to add underneath it. If I were to select all of them and then go to the Home tab and then Arrange and Align, and by the way, I hate doing the submenu of a submenu of a submenu thing, so I've got them all here in my quick access toolbar. But if I were to choose Align Center, what's going to happen there is PowerPoint takes the average of all of these bits and moves them all, which is really annoying because the clear circle is where you want it. So with Bright Slide, we've modified the alignment tools, which allows you to align to the selected objects, which is the default behavior, but also to the object you selected first, or align to guides if you're going to use those. And because I hate submenus like this, we've also added in keyboard modifiers as well. So if you press and hold the Shift key whilst you're using the standard alignment tools, it will now align to the center of the object you first selected. A couple of other really quick things, like here we've got a whole load of icons, which is fine, but they're all different sizes. So you can go to the Bright Slide tab, choose Match Size, and now they're all the same size. We've got another tool here which allows you to align all the objects or distribute them to a grid. It brings up this little tool here, and now you can choose how many rows and how many columns there are, and also how far apart they are from each other. So it's a nice quick way of doing things like that. So lots of different tools that you can use to kind of really bring your content to life. And I would highly recommend that you check it out as a boost to your productivity. The final thing I suspect we've got time for today is that I want to show you something that really does revolutionize the way that you present in PowerPoint, and it's a transition called Morph. There are lots of different types of transitions in PowerPoint. They are all controlled in the Transitions tab up here, and if you click on this drop-down menu, you'll see there are loads of them, and all of them are terrible. I mean, why you'd ever want Origami Bird, I have absolutely no idea. But it may not be the worst, because there's also things like Aeroplane, which is equally bad, and there's things like where are we? Something like crush, which is exactly what you'll do to the hopes and dreams of your audience if you use it. So if in doubt, don't use these transitions. As with animations, fade is absolutely the one you want to use because it's nice and simple and subtle. Except when it comes to this new transition here called morph. Let me show you what it does briefly, and then I can show you the impact that it can have. So if I were to draw a box on one slide here like this, nice and simple, use the thumbnails on the left-hand side here to duplicate that slide. So you can do that using Control and D. You can then take this box and move it over to the right-hand side of the slide, for example. So far, so basic. But if you go to the Transitions tab on the ribbon and choose the Morph transition here, what that does is it recognizes that this box is the same on both slides. And it will now go, oh, OK, it's the same box, but in a different place. I will seamlessly morph from one slide to the next. And you think, oh, that's quite clever. What if I don't just move it? What if I were to maybe shrink it down and maybe also change the color of it? And PowerPoint goes, oh, OK, it's the same box, but in a different place and a different size and a different color. I can handle that. And now all of a sudden you think, well, what could I do with that? Because, I mean, let's be honest, having a box move around like this is just a parlor trick. So again, it's distracting, but can it be useful? So maybe what you can do instead is if you have a complex chart, a complex process diagram, flow, table, anything like that, where there's a lot of complexity like this, maybe you can say, well, here's the overall process, which is a great infographic, a lovely PDF, a wonderful printout, but a terrible slide because no one can see it, let alone in an online environment where you're all looking through this in a small laptop screen, indeed in a window in a small laptop screen, so it's tiny. But you can say, here's the overall onboarding process for new hires. Now I want to show you just the strategy and planning. Then we're going to move across to the launch event and so on and so forth, moving around to show you a variety of details of everything, talking about what's relevant, adding in anything that's needed before finally you come to the end where you say, so that's it. And then this is the overall summary. And that's what I'll share you with you as a PDF afterwards. And this is all just done using Morph. So you can see here, if I go back to the start, the trick is that I've got the entire diagram on one slide. If you were to zoom out, you can see again, the entire diagram is there on this full slide. But if I go to the next slide, here's the trick. It's exactly the same diagram, but now just much bigger, with only a small portion on the visible area of the slide. And so the morph transition is just picking this up and saying, it's the same diagram, just larger and moved, and it's automatically moving it for you and increasing the size. Likewise, this one is now just shifted to the left. So morph is moving it all to the left. And so you can take that even further with a slide like this, for example, here, where we've got a pie chart, which is looking at kind of different elements of it. So here's maybe the overall elements of different global AI technology. But let's just focus in on the NLP portion in the top right-hand corner. I'm now going to use Morph to focus in on that and then overlay this with an additional pie chart to be able to break that content down. So again, you've got this idea of kind of high-level data sets going into more detailed data sets, and it's all just done using Morph. You can see here, there's the pie chart. It's a perfectly standard Excel or PowerPoint based pie chart, so nice and easy. And then on this one here, we've got the same pie chart, just much larger, and this time just adding in a few custom shapes to it, which in this case is what is that shape called? It's a bit like an arc, but it's called there we are, a block arc. There we are, beautifully named. So you've got that same idea, and we'll just overlay that over the top. But the morph transition is doing that hard job of making things larger and focused in on the relevant areas for you. And you can take it even further than that if you want to. So it's not just about taking an element and moving it, which is kind of like Prezi if you've ever come across that. You can do some really interesting things like this. So this is a picture of a beach, but imagine it's any kind of complex graphic. So it could be a data table, a chart, anything like that, especially when you've got a picture of it or a screenshot, for instance. And you can say, well, here's the element, but now I want to be able to focus your attention on particular pieces, and you're creating zoom lens type effects, all just done using Morph. So to show you how that works and just how quick and simple it can be, I'm going to start from a completely blank slide. I'm going to add into my picture placeholder here that picture of the beach. So I've got that inserts like that. And then I'm going to copy this. So you've got two of them and use the alignment tools to line those up on top of each other. So you've now got two pictures of the beach, much like the frying pan that we had before. I'm then going to use the picture format tab on the ribbon and crop over on the right hand side to use the crop tools, these little black grab handles, to crop the image down to focus on just one particular area. So say the pool over here on the left. Now I don't like the way that's a rectangle, it doesn't really work very nicely. So I'm going to again go to the picture format tab and crop on the right, but this time choose the drop down where you can choose to crop to a shape. And you can choose to crop to any standard shape you want. So let's choose the oval. Now that is an oval, which again, I don't really like. It doesn't work very nicely for me. So I'm going to go back to the picture format tab, back to crop, and this time choose aspect ratio, where you can now choose any of these standard aspect ratios. And if you choose 1:1 square, you now get a nice perfect circle. Okay, then what I'm going to do is take that cropped image of the circle and make it larger so it focuses attention, and I can either put an outline around it or maybe just a brief shadow around the outside to give it that sense of it being an extra layer on top. That is 90% of the work, and yet we've still not done a huge amount to make it move. Because what I'm now going to do is duplicate the slide again using Control and D, and on the second slide move this pool highlight to focus on, say, the red umbrella here on the right. So just move it over the red umbrella. Now obviously that looks really odd, but if you open up the crop tool again, what you'll notice is that when it comes to cropping pictures in PowerPoint, you don't actually remove the image, you just hide it. So I like to think of the crop tool as a window through which you can see everything else. So I can now move this around and you can focus on the red umbrella. And now what you can do is you can apply the morph transition to the slide, and PowerPoint says, okay, it's the same picture in a different place with a different crop view. And what it's now going to do is to move from one to the other. And because that image isn't deleted, it will wonderfully take you through all of the various elements. And all you've done is just select those bits there like that, nice and easily. So it's really simple. Sorry, there they are. And so again, you can do the same thing. Here we've got a blurred image in the background and it reveals a more detailed image over the top. So if you think about all these different techniques, the idea of using highlighting and mask, simple animations to pace the flow of information, drawing out, highlighting attention, using the morph techniques to be able to bring your content to life, and using some nice simple graphic design principles, you really can make a significant impact really quite easily for any kind of presentation just using, as I said, standard PowerPoint. Right, we are 1 minute away, so perfect timing to finish. I'd like to thank everyone for joining. Brief shameless plug alert. The company I work for, Bright Carbon, these are all the different things we do. So we spend our time creating presentations, e-learning, animations and infographics. If you would like any help with any of those, please do feel free to get in touch. But more usefully for you guys, if you are creating content and want to know more, if you go to the Bright Carbon website, brightcarbon.com, there we have a whole load of completely free resources and tutorials. Every Thursday we run 30-minute webinar masterclasses just like this on a variety of topics to do with presentations, visualizing content and design, and of course PowerPoint. So check that out. Please do remember to fill out the evaluations. It's really important to see kind of how the conference can be improved. So check that out there. Hold up your phone and scan the QR code, or just grab a screenshot of the URL and you can go in, and not just for this session but all of them, just give it all 5s. It's all fine. It's kind of, you know, nice like that. Just give it top marks. If you would like to engage in more research with the Excel team at Microsoft, please do so. aka.microsoft/ExcelVG research is well worth checking out too. And if anyone would like to get in touch with me and learn more about PowerPoint and presentations, then please do feel free to do so. info@brightcarbon.com is probably the shortest one, or richard.goring@brightcarbon.com if you prefer. Also follow us on the Twitter @brightcarbon, where we'll happily geek out with you about presentations all day long. So thank you so much everyone for joining. As I said, if you want to check out the downloads, very shortly you'll find a PDF download there covering everything that I've looked at today, with step-by-step instructions and links to video tutorials. Thank you so much indeed for joining, and enjoy the rest of the conference. It will be another wonderful 48 hours to come.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for the great presentation. I've learned a lot of really great things about PowerPoint that I never knew could happen. So really looking forward to trying some of these out. All right, so hope everyone's still here. I can see we've still got a bit of a crowd, so let's take a look at what we have next. We have our next session in 5 minutes or 4 minutes time now. It's going to be Oz du Soleil, who's presenting a session on the Central 6, all of Power Query's joins explained. So take a break, head to the bathroom, grab a bite to eat, and we'll see you back here in 4 minutes.